Well, let's see, I think we're talking about voting registration here. You know, look, the turnout in city elections is pathetic. I mean, it's about 15%, 20%. I'll give you an interesting statistic. When Lee Brown and Orlando Sanchez ran against each other in 2001, there were 310,000 people that voted in that election. And Lee won that election by 160,000 votes over about 150,000 for Orlando. When Gina and Nice ran in the runoff in 2009, their vote total combined was less than what Orlando got losing to Brown in 2001. That tells you how dramatic a drop-off in city voting. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, and I'm not sure what the mayor can do about it, but it is pretty pathetic. Let me just say one thing on the pensions. We've not always had an unfunded liabilities. Our plans were fully funded until the year 2000. In 2001 and 2002, there were very significant increases to the pension plans. A bill that Sylvester carried has dramatically increased the unfunded liability.
Our next question goes to Mr. Costello from Ms. Jackson.
So, as development occurred throughout the city, new development, longtime residents are often left with unaffordable housing options. In your opinion, what is the best method to maintain, ensure quality, affordable housing within our neighborhoods?
I'm going to stick to the question for a minute. So we have a significant problem in the fact that the city is advocating for densification, redevelopment, and yet we have gentrification-related type issues. We need to do a better job of offering incentives to developers to make sure that we can avoid gentrification. We had a discussion, the first forum that we all attended the other day, Wednesday, was in the arts and cultural community, and we were talking about young artists who are getting pushed out of areas because of redevelopment is raising their rental rates. And so we talked a little bit about, and I advocated for setting up a separate district for the artists and giving incentives to developers who will be able to provide to them. Now I'll go back to the pensions, because I totally disagree with Mr. Turner about this. And if you ask Mr. Turner what the unfunded liability of the city of Houston is, $3.2 billion, ask him what the unfunded liability is to the employees and the teachers of the state.
Don't worry, Sylvester, I'll protect you. I think, if I get a little time back, I think it's one of the most important questions we've been asked today, because we talked about economic disparity, but what we also face in the city of Houston is geographic inequality. And when you look at the map and see where the folks living below the poverty line are concentrated, they're concentrated on the outskirts of their city with very few options, transit options, or anything else. And so it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to address this problem, to advocate and incentivize more livable neighborhoods. And if you want to see an example of where it can work, when you walk outside today, look around. Because a few years ago, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot here in the East End, but some people were willing to dream, and now that dream's becoming a reality. Thank you.
On affordable housing, it's needed all over the city. You have to have good paying jobs. It goes back to everything we talked about up above. Number two, the city of Houston is paying $15,000 a door to establish residential housing downtown. It's about time now that we push that to the neighborhoods. Going back now to the pension issue, let me just say, on the borrowing from the future, that was a $77 million advantage for the city of Houston. It was cost savings, cost avoidance, never intended to be pension reform. The city will face its toughest financial challenges, 2016, 17, and 18. That would have benefited from the city. With respect to Bill on the pensions in 2001, that initiative was brought from the city of Houston to the legislature, and the actuaries were wrong. The assumptions were wrong. That was not the state of Texas imposing something on the city. It was what the city wanted. With regards to ERS, the state employee system, $500 million a year was costing the state. We have now made that system actuarially sound, and I was one of the authors, and I will stand my ground to anyone.
As I mentioned earlier, when I was on council, I was a strong advocate and worked personally on the issue of affordable housing, making sure that neighborhoods that were experiencing gentrification didn't get totally wiped out. People who had been living there all their lives getting pushed out because they couldn't afford their property taxes. This is something that's been near and dear and very passionate to me. And so I've been supportive of mixed income development, making sure that hardworking families can exist in beautiful neighborhoods just like their neighbors can. But once again, one Houston cannot leave any neighborhood behind. And so one of the things I'm going to do as mayor is making sure that our housing and community development department is really providing as big of a bang for the buck for respective neighborhoods. Making sure that we're effectively using the LAR lots to support hardworking families, city employees, making sure that young families have a decent place to start their lives together.
Are we on pensions or affordable housing? Let me talk to you about affordable housing. We do have options, and we have a wonderful conflict. That conflict is the abundant development that's taking place in the city next to heritage homes, or homes that have been long-standing in communities. And we understand that there is this tension that once you have this multi-million-dollar development, whether or not those individuals who've been living in the neighborhood will be able to afford their taxes. And the answer is yes. Under a Ben Hall administration, I intend to grandfather in, or will support policies to grandfather in those properties that are already there. The diversity of the community itself is a value that we need to preserve. I'm also supportive of age qualification of homes for purposes of tax assessment. Both of those can preserve the native population while encouraging development.
Well, thanks for that age exemption. I appreciate that. Workforce housing is a conundrum every place in this country, every major city. As cities grow more dense, the real estate value is going to inevitably become more valuable, and it's harder then to build affordable housing. There's some good models around the country on mixed-use development that I think are making some headway. We currently have one going out in the Gulfton area that I think may be a good model. But this is a problem we're going to face for a long time. But I think it's important to also recognize, and I saw this in Kemah, we had a neighborhood there was an old traditional neighborhood that the waterfront was impinging on. And there were some people that didn't want to sell, but there were also some old families there that sold their property for a lot of money, and they were really happy that they were able to do that. So I think we've got to be very careful about the degree to which we try to retard development, because we're affecting people's property value and what they can realize. That's the biggest asset that they have, their home.
Thank you. You want to protect your home? How about pay for the pensions? There's talk about the pensions, it's pensions, it's pensions. How about let's just pay it and move on? It doesn't matter how we got here, but here we are. So we need to take care of the people that took care of us, pay it, and move on. Every city, major city in the United States has planning. The city of Houston really doesn't have any type of plan. We need to work with groups like Blueprint Houston to move this city forward and to have a plan where people aren't pushed out. If you look around Houston, what is Houston? It's a collection of neighborhoods. I want to make sure that I'm protecting your neighborhood and we're moving forward.
Hamilton, Gramajo, Fe y Justicia has the following question for Chris Bell.
Several cities across the nation are developing new models of partnership with banks to run municipal ID programs with no cost to the city. One of these models is municipal ID debit card all-in-one. This kind of identification will allow people in our community to open bank accounts, cash their paychecks, and it will activate our local economy. What is your position on this initiative?
I think we need to be doing everything that we possibly can to allow people to come out of the shadows and give them an opportunity to lift themselves up. And I think giving people an opportunity to open bank accounts and cash their paychecks is asking very little. I do think cost is an issue, and if we can do it at no cost to the city by partnering with the banks, that is certainly a very big step in the right direction. I also think we can learn from other cities that have already gone in this direction and perhaps learn from their mistakes. I'm a little bit concerned that New York has a municipal ID, but based on what I've learned, the percentage of people actually signing up for the municipal ID is very low. And so we need to look for ways to address that if we choose to go in this direction.
I certainly want to take a look at that and see what those other cities have done. I do know that on the state level, and just in this legislative session, we talked about coming up with some form of an ID card on a statewide basis and working, for example, with the Department of Public Safety, DPS, to come up with something. I think it does need to be something. I think we need to look at more of a uniform sort of system instead of doing it piecemeal. But to the extent, for example, that that doesn't happen on the state level, then I think then the individual cities can kind of look at a way to try to achieve a definable objective. But I do want to take a careful look at it to see whether or not it's something that we can efficiently do and not just say yes to you without knowing that having the additional information in place.
Thank you. I want to really very quickly go back to affordable housing. You know, one of the biggest challenges that I think I'll have as mayor, given your permission to serve you, is the fact that if you live in a neighborhood where someone makes a good investment, a personal investment, they build a beautiful home, buy a lot, put a beautiful structure to it, in the next evaluation, you're paying for that investment. We've got to find a way to make sure that that doesn't continue to be the practice. And this is how gentrification occurs. People do good things by wanting to move into closer to the city, buy a home and refurbish it, create all kinds of things and build beautiful homes, but then good families who've been there for a long time get pushed out as a result. On this issue, I support it. I was one of the early advocates years ago when we encouraged banks to look at the matricula as a form of ID to open up accounts. So I don't see that there's anything wrong with this. I think it's important to do. I think it will support families from having to keep from going to check cashing places. Thank you.
Hamilton, I think I'm going to give you some time back on this question. The answer is I would be interested in exploring and investigating this option. In my initial assessment of it, I would divide it into two components. One is the concept of having a municipal ID for individuals. The other is whether or not the municipal ID can be used for bank cashing purposes or check cashing purposes. One of the things I do want to protect is individuals from these excessively high check cashing businesses that are taking percentages of money and proceeds from individuals without bank accounts. So I would support policies that would give greater access to individuals and more individuals to be able to access banking facilities. The concept of a municipal ID, however, I would invite your comments and the comments of others before forming a policy.
I guess I'm kind of the same boat, Hamlin. I don't know if about it you really have an opinion. I'd like to know more about it. I do think, though, that one program that I would like to see the city is to provide for short-term loans to their employees that get into financial trouble so they don't have to go to these payday lenders. There's a lot of programs that employers are doing in conjunction with banks now, and I've actually been involved in trying to get some of our employers here locally to look at that. And it's something that, frankly, I've done in every company I've ever run before. That, you know, if one of your employees gets in some kind of financial trouble because, for example, they hit a pothole and have to replace all their tires, you shouldn't have to go to a payday lender. You ought to go to your employer and say, hey, I need $1,000. I'm going to pay it back $50 a month over the next 20 months or something like that.
Yes, I support this. I do not support government creating obstacles for the people that it's entitled to serve or intended to serve. I think if the issue is predatory lenders, then issue a card, and then they can go to the bank and cash their checks. And look at the question here. The question is paychecks. These people are working. So why would government get in the way of cashing someone's check? It's beyond me. I think that it's certainly the right thing to do. I think that in the McVeigh administration, we're going to implement that almost immediately.
While on City Council, I recently helped pass the payday lending and title loan lending ordinance. We have over 1,400 of those businesses here in the city of Houston. And it's approaching the problem of unbanked, the people who don't have bank accounts. I worked with AARP, United Way, the Urban League, and Catholic Charities to get a model ordinance adopted, which is an ordinance that's been adopted by over 20 cities throughout the entire state. However, we've had the inability to get that particular ordinance adopted by the state legislature, because what happens is that this model ordinance, these businesses are simply picking up, closing their shop, and moving outside the city limits of the city of Houston. We need to continue to encourage the people in Austin to give us an ordinance that addresses this particular predatory lending practice.
And our final question comes from Paul Puente to Mr. Turner.
The City of Houston relies on its compliance officers and building inspectors to make sure that contractors perform quality work, that it's up to code, and that the workers are classified properly, also receive the correct wages. What is your position on increasing the number of city compliance and inspectors, both within the Office of Business Opportunity and Public Works, to bring higher level of quality assurances to the city contracting work?
And let me just say, Paul, the Office of Business Opportunity and Public Works are two important entities of the City of Houston. We've had a good conversation this morning in respect to contractors, responsible contracting, acting in a responsible way. When we talked about safety, OSHA, we've talked about the anti-wage theft ordinance, and all of those matters. And it would be a priority with me if you give me the opportunity to be your mayor. I certainly don't see the need to reduce. I would like to come in and do my own assessment on how well, for example, those areas are performing, whether or not we need more, whether or not the jobs are being done, whether or not the objectives are clear, whether or not the enforcement is equal, and that's something that I would want to come and bring to the table. But I want to get in there and take a look at who's doing what, and whether or not we have the best people doing the best job, and whether or not the objectives are very clear.
Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. You know, I hear from businesses that they just can't get their permits fast enough. And ultimately that affects our economy. We want businesses to be able to open their doors. We want them to be able to hire people. We want them to start selling their products and their goods and their services. Ultimately that ends up helping the economy. That's one Houston. And so when I hear, when I listen to your question, Paul, I want to make sure that I work with you and others and review what we have there to make sure that if it is more people we need, let's do more people. If it is better technology that we need, then let's invest in that technology. But also making sure that we work with you to provide us the apprenticeship and the training to make sure that our staff knows how to do the job and is doing it effectively so that we can get these permits issued out fast. I think it all works together, and so I look forward to working with you to do an assessment of that process. Thank you.
Paul, thank you for the final question here. And let me say that I am a pro-advocate for businesses being able to efficiently get permits, get their inspections performed quickly so that they can get on with the work and get the city out of their business. Having said that, I equally believe that contractors must be supervised and there needs to be some oversight to ensure their compliance with the contract, especially the issue of wage theft, where individuals are working and not being paid the amounts that the bid was contracted for. Having said that, I am very interested in exploring the concept of giving the employees or those who are working on the site immunity and the right to report. And if there is found to be a violation, those employees would get triple the amount of the penalty for what the contractor has failed to comply with in the contract. I'm interested in exploring that with you.
Paul, I don't know whether we've got enough or not. I know that traveling around the city, I see a lot of sorry work that's been done. And so either we don't have enough or they're not doing the job, one of the two, and we need to figure out which it is.
Thank you. The first thing that the city says, typical response in, for things like enforcement, for code issues, is we don't have the money to pay for people. And that's just not acceptable. If council and the mayor is going to pass law to make sure that the people of this city are getting the most out of the money that they're spending, how about follow through with it? How about have enforcement? Otherwise, the laws that are passed by our city council and the mayor are, quite frankly, they're unfunded mandates. These laws and ordinances are passed to keep people safe and to protect the interest of the people of this city. How about let's doing our job?
Thank you. The biggest challenge that the city has right now is the fact that we can't keep good inspectors. The problem is that the market is hiring them away from the city right now. The other problem that we have is that we don't have consistency amongst our inspectors. So for instance, let's say I'll take an electrician first. They will go to a particular commercial property and inspect a site and have to come back the next day. A different inspector would come and he'd have an entirely different opinion. So we have to have consistency amongst the trades as we do the inspection. The other problem that we have is during this boom in development, we're allowing people to go and make changes to city's facilities, and they're not coming back and enforcing it. I'll give you a classic example. We live inside the loop and there's redevelopment going on, and someone might come in and fill a roadside ditch and walk away and leave it up to the residents to fuss with the city 2 years later. Well, we need to do a better job of determining where those violations are and making that particular developer, before he moves away from that site, to fix those improvements.
Well, that speaks to the problem, but it doesn't speak to the solution. And if people are leaving, or if we can't keep them on staff because we're not paying them enough, perhaps we'd like to consider paying them more. And that may be a solution to the problem. And certainly I think the question speaks for itself. If we are falling behind and we don't have enough inspectors, then it needs to be addressed. And here again, this is an area where I think that if you have a labor liaison on your staff, these concerns can be brought to the forefront before they become real problems. And that's something I would want to have in my administration.
That concludes our questions. We will now start with closing statements. We're going to answer in reverse order from opening statements, starting with Mr. Turner, finishing with Mr. Garcia. You each have 1 minute.
Thank you. For 32 years, I have been a business owner downtown. In 32 years with my employees, I've never missed paying them one time. Now, I may not have gotten paid, but they got paid. For 26 years, I've been in the legislature. I've been fighting for working men and women. My record is clear. When it comes to health care, my record is clear. When it comes to fighting for those who are less privileged, and boys have not been seen, I've been right there. When SEIU called upon me to write letters on behalf of those to increase people's livable wage, I've done that. When the AFL-CIO has called upon me to deal with unfair labor practices, I have done that. In this legislative session, when people were trying to eliminate voluntary dues checkoff, I championed that cause, and we kept that from happening. When it comes to undocumented students getting financial aid from the state, I voted for it. When it comes to seeking licenses, public ID, not just in a mayoral campaign, I have been there. If you want any indication of what a mayor will do, look at the record. When it comes to pensions, I've helped to solve those problems.
I want to close today by thanking the organizers of this forum and thanking all of you who are involved in the issues that we've been discussing. I want to thank you for giving a voice to individuals who might otherwise not have one. Years ago, when I served as a member of the Houston City Council, I also volunteered at a homeless facility, cooking with a crew once a week. And so every Thursday morning, I would walk past hundreds of homeless people. And so when issues involving the homeless were brought before City Council, I couldn't just look the other way. Those were real people that I saw on a weekly basis. And that's what you all are doing by giving a voice to these individuals and bringing these concerns to the forefront. We face dramatic economic disparity in this city, and we cannot be the most modern city in the country if that situation is not addressed. I look forward to working with all of you to improve this city.
Thank the organizers for this event. I really do appreciate being here. I believe that the issues we discuss and my positions on this issue makes me the best qualified to be the next mayor moving this city forward. It reminds me of the fact that we're both grandparents, my wife and I spend a number of days with my kids, my grandkids, Elion and Gianna, and we And when I give my kids back to when I give my grandkids back to my son, it reminds me that the issues that we discussed today and the policies that we're going to decide not only affect us in the city of Houston today, but it also affects generations moving forward. So help me roll up my sleeves and you roll up your sleeves to work on improving our infrastructure, particularly our crumbling streets and drainage. Help me get more money for public safety so that the police officers can police our neighborhoods and have the necessary equipment they need to get their mission done. Help me work through the city's finances so that we can go to our constituents and our citizens and say we're using your money wisely. Houston is the greatest place in this country, and I believe we have great things to do moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking the men on this stage. All have served the public, some longer than others, and I appreciate getting to know all of them. Some I've known longer than others. I think that what this race is about our future. I want to bring economic development to the city of Houston. We need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to protect our jobs and to protect our future. I'm not just concerned about the next 6 months or the next 6 years. I'm concerned about the next 60 years. So this race is not about me, it's about Houston and you and your job. I don't know that many people here know that the city of Houston lost a major contract with Boeing Airlines to relocate to Houston and to create jobs. That was lost. And the reason why it was lost is because we didn't have an effective economic development office in the city of Houston that reports to the mayor that will bring prosperity to our city. We must recruit, recruit, recruit.
Well, thank all y'all for coming this morning. I suspect that most of you had something more enjoyable to do than to listen to us bicker about pensions this morning. When I look at the city, every metric seems to be going in the wrong direction. Our infrastructure is terrible, 4,000 potholes, the city still floods when we have these big rains. Crime is increasingly a problem. A couple of weeks ago we were declared the robbery capital of America. We have a burglary every 15 minutes. The police department only solved 9% of the burglaries that were committed last year. We have 300 fewer police officers on the street than we had 10 years ago. And it's hard to really say that somehow this is an economic problem because we've been in the biggest boom in our lifetime. Revenues have been coming in at 8% year over year at the city of Houston. This is a question of management. And I think you need to remember that what we're really doing is we're hiring the CEO of a $5 billion corporation. That's really what we're doing, and I would suggest I'm the most qualified person for that job.
First, I want to thank Rebecca for being here this morning. I want to thank also the panelists for asking the questions. I want to thank you all for being here. Communities united, that's a powerful statement because we, the people, should always be the power. I'm running for mayor of the city of Houston because I believe the community, the people, actually should govern this city by and through their representative bodies. Over the last 6 years, quite honestly, we've been on a personal agenda of the mayor. As a result, debt has increased, our streets have fallen apart, our policing has gone down, crime has increased. It's time for us now to return to the core services. City employees are not mere widgets in the clog of government. City employees are our best asset. As your mayor, I intend to treat them that way. Thank you so much for your ear.
Thank you so much, and again, I want to thank everyone involved in today's occasion, and thank you as well. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I have led, managed, and reformed a major organization. I managed a nearly $5 million budget, and did it through tough times, but never balancing my books on the backs of my employees. But it is one Houston when the mayor can work closely with labor, can work closely with business, can work closely with every employee, whether active or retired, making sure that we're focused on our future because our best days are yet to come. But it's also imperative that we make sure that no matter what walk of life, whether you're just new to this country, that you're also part of the solution, part of the promise, and part of the opportunity to move us forward. That is one Houston. I have led management reform, and all the issues we've talked about today have to do with leadership, management, and reform. I've done it. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to earn your vote. Thank you.
We would like to close this forum by thanking our candidates. You guys have a big job ahead. Best of luck to all of you. Special thanks to our distinguished panel. Thank you for organizing this event, as well as all the organizers. And special thanks to our audience for being here today. Also, heads off to Precinct 6 Constable Eliodoro Martinez for providing additional security on this property. And on behalf of Univision, my family at Univision, muchas gracias. Have a great day. Gracias.
Where these chairs go?
Almost like a water bottle? Hmm?